Hello and welcome everyone to another episode, the second episode of Zwick's Flicks, the Ed Zwick podcast. I'm your host, Ryan, and with me today I have a special guest co-host and friend, Doug. Doug, how you doing?
I'm doing wonderful, Ryan. I'm glad that you asked me to come on and talk about this beautiful movie.
I'm really excited to have you on. If you're listening to this podcast, I'll give you a quick background. Doug is an online friend. We have yet to meet in person. One day we will, and we'll give each other a nice big bear hug and a kiss on the cheek.
I might slide my hand into your back pocket. You never know.
Yeah, sure. Absolutely. Slide your hand back there. Anything you got to do, Doug. But Doug and I met through our mutual fandom of Sylvester Stallone and his films, and we've done some of those reviews together. So if you just Google Last of the Action Heroes Podcast Network, all of our shows come up on that podcast feed. You can check out all the other shows that join us on that feed regarding action films, Stallone, Arnold, and all those good action stars. But so Doug and I have collaborated before. So I'm really excited to have him on because, one, he's a great voice on the airways, but also a great friend. And Doug, you are a fan of Glory, correct?
Very, very correct. Yes. My dad was a big history buff, loved all the old war movies and stuff. So I saw this really early on in 1980, 89. 89, I was 11 years old. So I was really young. I hung on every scene. Even at that young age, like you could feel the weight of the message of the movie. It was the acting. It was the score. Mm-hmm. Probably most of all, this movie is responsible for me falling in love with movie scores and really understanding the fact that a good score can take a good movie and make it great. It can take a great movie and make it out of this world phenomenal. That's exactly what James Horner does with this.
Well said. In fact, speaking of the score, it's interesting because when this film was finished, when the principal photography and filming was done, Ed Zwick took the film and showed it to the studio heads and to get their feelings on it. And there were people, Doug, already crying in the film, like these grown men crying, as they should be, and as I have, and I'm sure you have too with this film, without the score. The score wasn't done yet.
Yeah. So yeah. The first test screening to the other producers, right?
Yeah.
Is that the one you're talking about? Yeah. Grown men crying.
And there was no score. That's just how good this film is and how powerful this film is. Now, they might have had a generic type score. I'm not sure how they do these movie showings without a soundtrack. Maybe there's some sort of, I don't know, what do you call it? A
placeholder? Like a...
Yeah, generic. The word I'm looking for is generic. It's like a generic type sounding score. Maybe, in fact, I know what studios sometimes do. They'll actually take scores from other films that are already made and they'll implement those. So
they'll take like a classical piece, like where the pace would fit with the scene.
I wonder if Ed did that. So he didn't say in his book whether he did or didn't. The score, Doug, totally agree. When some of these chords in this film hit, when you watch it again and again, I've seen this film numerous times, of course, over the years. You just have to hear the quick little score of the choir boys singing, and I'm starting to tear up already. Because you just know what the heart punch is coming, and the musical cues gets you right away into getting that teary-eyed. Absolutely, with this film. Yeah, so like you said, Doug, this film did come out in 1989. You were 11. I was 14. So my first memory of this film was I did not see it in the theaters. And I'm trying to remember. I mean, it was a long time ago now, but I'm trying to remember why I decided to rent the film, because that's what I would have done. It was, again, 1989. I was 14. I was deep into renting and buying VHS tapes at the time. I was a VHS collector. I collected movies all the time. I suspect I probably rented it just because it was a war film, and I'm a big fan of war films from Vietnam, even at that young age, of Vietnam films, any kind of war film, historical war films, old-timey war films. But definitely this would have been my first real Civil War type film. I cried at 14 watching this film. Absolutely cried.
Yeah, again, the score has a lot to do with it, but you got to give it to Ed Zwick too. This is an Ed Zwick podcast, so let's give him his due. Like,
please shower on him. I want him to come onto the podcast. Let's shower out those positive vibes. Okay,
you got to give it to the way he directed those scenes that drum up the most emotion.
Yeah, we're going to talk about a couple of those scenes and his experiences from that. Okay, so this film, Doug, didn't make as much as I thought it did. It was not a box office bomb. It barely broke even. So it had a budget of $18 million in 88, 89, and only a box office of $27 million, which is, it's surprising, but not surprising. partly because you think about, well, Ryan, look at the cast, look at the cast. Well, back then, this cast wasn't quite the cast that you would think of today. Had this movie been made today with these names, it would have been
right.
Yeah,
Especially in the book excerpts that you sent me, the roles that Denzel Washington and Morgan Freeman played before this, that Ed Zwick was alerted to them from playing, was small roles in in small projects.
Yeah, well, Denzel was a TV actor. He was a Saint Elsewhere.
Yeah,
it's odd to think. This movie was sort of Denzel's coming out party and Morgan Freeman's, but this movie was a big coming out party for Denzel. What are your overall feelings on the Denzel's performance?
I hate to seem like a ball washer, but every time I watch this, I hang on every part of Denzel's performance. Like it's no surprise that he won the Best Supporting Actor Oscar, because he dove in, he embodied this runaway slave, and he just acted the shit out of every scene he was in. It wasn't like chewing the scene. We've seen so many actors in all the slide movies that we do, like the way they chew the scenery. He wasn't. He was just doing it. He was acting. I can't say enough about Denzel in this movie.
Totally agree. I think this movie was obviously my first introduction to Denzel. I don't think I'd ever seen him in anything. I mean, I was probably aware of the show at the time of St. Elsewhere, but I never watched it as a teenager or as a kid. So this was a well-deserved. He got the Oscar for Best Supporting and the Golden Globe, I believe, and well-deserved for this film. Now, keep in mind, this was Ed Zwick's only his second theatrical film to direct. Talk about a big jump from About Last Night to Glory. Did you catch any of the story there about how he went from that to this?
I wasn't because as I was listening to it, I was doing chores. So
no, that's fine.
I wasn't hanging on the story as much. All the Matthew Broderick stuff, like bored.
We're gonna get to that. We're gonna get to that. Yeah.
Was it him that went and saw the statue in Boston?
So Ed himself is a big Civil War buff, and he was as a kid. So this is something that he was always drawn to. It's been in his blood since he was a kid. So the same age that I was when I saw this film and fell in love with the Civil War history because of this film myself, he too was a Civil War fan as a teenager and as a young child. He made his mom go to these Civil War monuments and exhibitions. And the poor mother's like, oh my gosh, but also very happy that her young son was like interested in this stuff, but she was bored. So he's always had a fascination with this. He was sent the script that Kevin Jarre had written. So we're going to talk about Kevin Jarre, if you don't mind, Doug. I wouldn't mind talking about him right now.
I know that he worked on the story for Rambo First Blood Part 2.
This guy, he's put his fingers in a couple of movies that I'm a huge fan of. And it's interesting. For example, Glory. He wrote the screenplay for it. And then he did the story for Rambo First Blood Part 2, but he also wrote Tombstone.
Oh, man. Yeah, that's right up your alley.
Oh, Rick, yeah.
Maybe you should do a Kevin Jarre podcast.
No, well, it's funny. Well, those are big, but he also did Judgment Night, which was kind of fun. He did Navy SEALs, which was a lot of fun. He did The Devil's Own with Harrison Ford. He did The Jackal with Bruce Willis. He did the story for The Mummy. He did Rules of Engagement and then The Alamo. So he's kind of done some of these fun box office type, other than Glory, a lot, and Tombstone is just incredible. They're not like Oscar bait type movies. They're just kind of fun, but big time actors have been a part of his films. He died at an early age, heart failure at the age of 56.
That's a shame. 56, you can still rock and roll.
Absolutely. Now, did you know that he had an uncredited screen role in the movie Glory?
He was the white soldier that had the soldiers spat. What did he call just the soldiers fight with Denzel Washington's character? He has one of the lines that gets the waterworks flowing. Right before the Fort Wagner.
That's right. So one of the scenes that Kevin Jarre had, and this must be really cool though, if you think about it, he wrote this film. Now, so what Ed did is he took that screenplay and he fleshed out the characters from that screenplay. So I think what Kevin did is he kind of did like this part here, like the historical screenplay. It was more of this battle happened, they were at this part now. And I think Ed took that main story, though he's not credited for it, he fleshed out and gave the story the heart that it was probably needing. As we all know, Ed Zwick is an accomplished screenwriter by his own right and understands character development. I mean, he's part of those TV shows that we mentioned in the first episode of this podcast, of course, 30-something and other ones that he was a part of. So he's really good at developing his screenplay or dialogue and character development. So he added that oomph to this film, though he's not credited as a screenwriter for the film. But he did say it was interesting, as he's talking about being a director, that a good director and a writer will have that kind of relationship. So the director won't necessarily be credited as any kind of screenplay or writing, but that's the collaborative effort, is the director and the screenwriter will work together while during the filming to make the film that much of a better film. So here's the one scene with Kevin Jarre when, of course, the 54th Regiment, they're working. The soldiers are walking through their work area, coming back from a battle or whatever. And here's some of that interaction.
Hey, come on now. Buck up, boys. Hey, buck up now. Come on.
So that's, of course, Denzel's Trip character yelling at these soldiers, like, come on, man, be a bit of a lip here, which is not a good idea. These guys have seen battle, have seen their friends be killed, and he's telling them to buck up, and we're going to do this fight, too. We're going to show you how it's done.
See, someday they're going to let the 54th get into it, see? And all your troubles will be over. Come on now, chill. Hey. What'd you say? Boy. Boy.
So that was Kevin Jarre there. So what'd you say, boy? Which, of course, is an insult. Do you know why it's an insult? Actually, what the cultural reason for that is?
I'm just assuming it had to do with demeaning slaves.
A better podcaster would have this information, not ask the question.
Do you know the other white soldier here?
Yes, I do know who that is. That's the dude from Breaking Bad who rings the bell on his wheelchair.
Mark Margolis, yeah. Tio Salamanca.
Doug coming in, yeah. I forgot his character or the actor's name, but these little bit roles, I love seeing them in these little.
He has
roles.
just such a distinctive voice and face, so you can pick him out easily.
Hey, let me tell you. Shut up, Trip. You get up off me, Snowflake. See, let me explain something to you. See, the way I figure this war would be over a whole lot sooner if you boys just turn right on around, head on back down that way. And you let us head on up there where the real fighting is, huh?
The men dying up that road.
And it wouldn't be nothing but Rebs dying if they let the 54th in it. Listen.
All right. So the fight breaks out, of course. Morgan Freeman's character comes and breaks it up. And then, yes, the classic moment, we're going to have to show it to. This is the Kevin Jarre redeeming moment for his character.
I'm glad you didn't play his the next line he has.
Oh, was it a bad word or something?
Yeah, when he compares something to tits on a bull.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, that's right. The character redeems himself. So when you hear this musical cue, Doug, you're going to get the chills.
No, I know. Every time I can think about it and get the chills. But it's just like the music buildup as they're, for anybody that's not watching, it's the whole regiment is walking through like a gauntlet, lined side by side of Union soldiers, just sending them off to almost certain death.
Oh, yeah. You ever get tired of it?
Oh, I'm getting the chills already.
I know. It's hard not to. It's a great shot, too. So, of course, for our audio listeners, this is that classic shot of the 54th Regiment walking forwards on either side of the white soldiers, and you see the backsides of the black soldiers, and that carrying the colors, and that music's going, and then Kevin Jarre redeems his character.
Get down, 54th!
I literally got goosebumps, man.
Me too. Me too. Every time. Also, you see like Trip, who had the fight with him earlier on, they share a look. They share that the moment before he says that. And after he says, give him hell 54th, Trip, has a smile on his face.
Smile. Right where that cue of music comes in is where that smile kicks in. Yeah,
because he doesn't smile often in this movie.
No. The best line that Denzel did was at the beginning when they're in the tent. Morgan Freeman's character asked him, like, what'd you do before you got here? And he's,
what about you there, Buck? Where about you from?
Yeah, I'm around Tennessee. Yeah, I ran away when I was 12 years old. I ain't never looked back.
What you doing since then?
I run for president. I ain't win, though.
Because at first he's a real jerk to everyone, but when he cracks that joke, it humanizes him. And
he breaks everybody. Everybody laughs at that.
All right, let's hear what Ed had to say about Denzel since we're talking about Denzel. Oh, actually, before we get to Denzel, let's close or put a pin on Mr. Jar. So it was just interesting that when we listened to the book, Doug, that Kevin and Ed, they kind of butted heads, but it's nice to see that they came together, that Kevin Jar allowed the film to be made that needed to get made. And then he had a part in the film. I thought that was very nice of all that to happen. And a big moment too, for Kevin to yell that part, give him Hell 54 and every grown man starts crying. I mean, that's a powerful moment that Kevin got to be in the film and to see his film come to fruition.
I would think that in any good partnership, it's not going to be all sunshine and rainbows from day one to release of the film. You know, you're gonna butt heads, especially if you never worked together before. Also, there's gonna be some growing pains, but it's not the butting heads, and it's not how it starts. It's like that moment where you come together, and now it starts to flow. And now it's like playing off one another and making it work in the end. That's what counts.
The next day, it was time to shoot the first tent scene. I said good morning to Morgan, Jimmy, and Andre as they walked onto the set, ready to rehearse. Denzel was nowhere in sight. After a few minutes, I began to get edgy. The AD told me he was still in makeup. 10 minutes later, I was getting angry. We were on a very tight schedule. Finally, he appeared, with his head shaved. We'd never discussed it, but the moment he began to rehearse, I stared, open-mouthed, at the utter transformation that had taken place. Overnight, he had become Trip, volatile, funny, angry, mesmeric. The next night, as we watched dailies, despite the wonderful specific work by the other actors in this scene, it was impossible to take your eyes off Denzel. That night, I still couldn't sleep, but it wasn't anxiety that kept me awake. I had been in the presence of greatness. I'd never seen an actor command the focus by doing so little. It wouldn't be the last time I felt that way working with Denzel, neither on this movie nor in the others we were to make in years to come.
Doug, you said the exact same thing about you couldn't take your eyes off him, and Ed felt the same way watching him behind the camera. Here's a young director, 35 years ago, feeling the exact same way that you expressed in this podcast. You couldn't take your eyes off Denzel. This was Ed seeing this transformation of the head shave. They didn't talk about it. He did that on his own. What do you think of that? It's very daring, wouldn't you say, for an actor to say, I'm going to shave my head?
Yeah, especially if you don't discuss that with the director beforehand. But what can you say? Like, yeah, it might have been a bold move, but it was the right one. He transformed from people might have known him from St. Elsewhere. Now all of a sudden he's a totally different guy. You start with a clean slate.
Now, Denzel, of course, had a part in the movie, which is one of the most heartbreaking, transformative parts of the whole film. And it makes me cringe every time. And it's a hard one to watch. It's a hard one to get through. Doug, the whipping scene. Yeah,
it is a hard pill to swallow. Even more so when I researched this movie a little bit more, that this never happened in real life.
Okay, that's right. We discussed, of course, before we started recording, how much we're going to go into the history of things, how much is it accurate. I don't think that's necessarily important so much because it is just a film that shares a message. And I think that's what's key here is the message about the treatment of blacks. So though they didn't do the whipping necessarily of blacks from the army perspective, black people were whipped by white people. So, of course, this was showing the inhumane treatment that black people received at the hands of white people as when they were slaves. I think that's why the scene was kept. What do you think? What are your thoughts on why it was shown, though it wasn't historically accurate for Army to do that?
I agree. And for all I knew until 2 days ago when I was researching this, that it actually did happen. But if you think about it, the Union soldiers were against slavery. They were abolitionists. They were against the mistreatment of these humans. So to punish him the way that all these slaves that were punished on the plantations and stuff doesn't seem like it would fit with the Union Army's morals. However, I get why they included it here, and it's to kind of highlight what the slaves were going through, at that time. And I guess the most poignant way to display that is to include a whipping scene.
It is a powerful. It's hard to watch because now, if you're a fan of the movie, and of course you know the scene we're talking about, I don't know how many people listening know the story behind this scene. So I'll summarize a bit of it. Then I'm going to let Ed finish the story without spoiling it. They did do principal filming of the scene. What they did, they actually used a cloth that was enough that when Denzel was hit by this cloth, this prop whip, that he felt it. It wasn't necessarily like stinging, but imagine being hit by, I don't know, like a dish towel. Like you're going to feel it. You can feel the impact, but it's not going to break the skin or anything like that. So that's what they used. So John Finn, who played Sergeant Major Mulcahy, he was nervous about filming this scene as well, like being the guy. Like imagine like, hey, okay, today's the whipping scene, John. You're gonna whip a black guy. Like that's probably got to be hard to film, wouldn't you say?
Yeah. Oh my God, for him, absolutely. But the subject matter of the movie without this scene is heavy, right? It's just a heavy subject the movie covers. Ed Zwick, even, I don't know if it's in the excerpt, but he claims that the tension of the actors during this scene was real and it was palpable. Like you can feel it in the air. You know, you're upset about filming a flogging scene as it is, but these scenes were filmed in Georgia on the grounds where actual floggings happened hundreds of years before. So all that combined, like I think he compared it to ghosts being real, like being there on set.
They did the principal. Yes, thank you, Doug. Sorry, that was awesome. Yes, you're right. And they already did a lot of the shots, but Ed told Denzel, hey, we're going to do one more shot, and I'm going to let him finish the story here.
But we did the shot again anyway, as a safety mostly. This wasn't a scene anybody wanted to have to reshoot. At the end of the second take, the operator signaled that we were good. It would have been easy to move on to the reaction shots, but something told me there was more to be mined. I told Denzel we needed to adjust something at camera and that we would do the scene only once more. Then I took John Finn aside and told him not to stop whipping until I said cut. He gave me a dark look, but nodded grimly. I walked back to camera, made sure the dolly grip would again wait for my signal before pushing in, and called action. Just as he had done on previous takes, John ripped Denzel's shirt away and began to mete out the lashes. Once, twice, 3 times. In the prior takes, this would have been the moment for the camera to begin dollying in, but I waited. John raised the whip and brought it down again. 4 lashes, 5, 6. On the earlier takes, Denzel had absolutely refused to acknowledge the pain and humiliation of the moment. He would take any punishment that could be meted out. He would show nothing. He was in control. 7, 8. But now that control had been taken away. There he stood, helpless. The actor as well as the character, just as thousands of others had stood there before, abused, powerless, alone. How long would this go on, he must have wondered. Without entirely understanding what I was doing, I had recreated the circumstances of over 100 years before. By exerting my dominion over him, I was unconsciously shaming him. Was it manipulative? Was I violating his trust? Was he furious? Yes, to all. And yet, not at all. Though I hadn't told Denzel the plan, I somehow knew he wouldn't break character. The shame and mortification were real now. It only made him fight harder, refusing to break. I stared at the monitor, watching him struggle. His face twitched. I signaled the dolly grip to push in. As immersed as Denzel was in the moment, with the duality of consciousness reserved for only the greatest actors, he could sense the camera drawing near, digging deeper. That a single tear appeared and slid down his face, catching the light at the perfect moment, is the magic of movies.
Wow. What do you say to that?
It's heavy. It's heavy. And I don't want to say manipulative of Ed Zwick. I mean, he did it for a purpose.
That's what directors do, though. A good director will do this kind of stuff. This is not uncommon to sort of trick. Oh, for example, you remember the scene in Alien when the chest breaker comes out?
Yeah.
None of the actors knew that was going to happen except for the actor who I forget his name off the top of my head. The actor that had the chest thing in his because he was part of makeup.
John Hurt. Yeah,
that's right. He knew that was going to happen, but all their reactions of the thing coming out, they didn't know that was going to happen. So them jumping off the table and screaming was real.
Yeah.
So that was a manipulation by the director to trick the actors to get a real reaction, a raw reaction. And the fact that Ed knew that I'm going to do this to Denzel and he's going to be mad, angry, and pissed, but he's going to channel that character. He's not going to break. He's not going to look away. And I just love how that tear comes down, Doug. I mean, how do you do that?
This has baffled me for years, how he was able to do that. But I always think of it from the character's perspective. For all I knew, that was how Denzel expected the scene to play out anyway. But when you're watching it, you're thinking of the character's perspective. And this guy, you know, the evidence was already on his back when they ripped the shirt off.
I know that's whipped. The part that makes me cringe so hard is that this back has seen hell already and just adds literally insult to injury. It's heartbreaking.
You think Tripp as a character has been whipped so many times and he's probably early on shown vulnerability. He's probably shown pain and cried, but it's been done so many times that he is calloused over emotionally and mentally that he just stares Gould in the face, takes those whippings without showing any emotion, but every man reaches a point where you just can't hold it anymore, and that he doesn't bawl. It's just one single tear. His face doesn't change.
It does a bit. It does a bit. Let's actually watch a little bit. And this is great acting by Denzel. There's a bit of a quiver, I think, in his mouth. Just look for it. You'll see it.
That one single tear like shows his vulnerability at that time.
So here's the scene here. And let's give props, of course, to... We're going to get to Matthew, guys. Don't worry. He's going to be saving the best for last. But let's give props here, of course, to the acting of Mr. Broderick. And as they're both looking at each other, as he's watching what he has ordered to happen, he's watching it play out as he's looking at it, and how Denzel looks him right in the face as it's happening, his character. It's just such a... Yeah, they're both locked at each other, both different expressions on their faces, but powerful.
Yeah, Matthew Broderick is showing more pain in his face than Denzel is at this time.
Yeah, right there. There's that mouth movement there as he tenses up. You see, he licks his lips a little bit, purses his lips a little tighter. But you're right, though. It's not like he's bawling, but he purses himself. It was crazy, though. Of course, you can still hear the crack.
Yeah,
Craig, you're like, as a viewer, you're like, stop.
Yeah,
you're yelling.
Enough. He's had enough.
He's had enough. And of course, for our listeners, he's being, for the film, if you forget, he's being whipped because they thought he was deserting. He left the camp and he was caught as a quote unquote deserter. And of course, we find out later, and I've got a story for that. I won't say it now, but we all know what happened or why he left.
Oh, man. That gives me chills too, man.
Yeah, I know.
It's like how the music backs off just a little bit.
Right there. Look at the mouth. Do you see the mouth?
Yeah, it quivers.
It goes up and down. Yeah, but it's subtle, but it's there. He's just...
Yeah.
Does it end, Doug? I can't remember.
But there's a happy ending to the behind the scenes because, I mean, in the moment, after he calls cut, Zwick goes up to Denzel, tries to comfort him. Denzel like shrugs him off and storms off set. So Zwick was like, oh man, I messed up. But next day when they show up to film, Denzel's smiling. He's joking around with the other cast members. He gives Zwick a look and a big smile. He understood the assignment, as the kids say. As they say. And Denzel, what a guy. He's an actor where even if he's in a bad movie, Doug, he's never bad in it. Yeah. Yeah. I love him. I love watching him in interviews and stuff. He's hilarious. He's a character, man. We should cover some of his action films on the network. No, I don't cover black actors. Okay, so oh wait. A little bit of levity, guys. You have to have a little bit of levity after that brutal. Yeah, it was too heavy. Oh, break the tension. Okay. Oh, I love Denzel. All right, all joking aside. Okay, speaking of black actors, let's talk about our next one here. We'll get to Morgan in a second. We'll talk quickly about Andre Braugher. Yeah, rest in peace. Last year, right? Yeah, recent passing, Doug. Yeah, what a horrible loss. It was this film I became an Andre fan. Well, first and foremost, he passed away, yes, December 11th, 2023, at the age of 61. Did he make your worst to the best? Yes, he end of the year? Yeah. Yes, he did. I think he might have been my... Did you not listen to the episode? Yeah. There's so many. I can't keep track of everyone. I'm just bugging you. Check out my podcast, guys. If you're listening to this, it's called The Worst of the Best Podcast, and we have a yearly end episode where we cover the dead celebrities, and he definitely made the list, and I don't think he was my pick. I can't remember now, but very close to it because I've enjoyed him. So he was in, of course, this film was when I first got to see him as an actor. He was in a great cop show called Homicide, Homicide, Life on the Street. And of course, he was in Brooklyn Nine-Nine show for 8 years. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Did you see him as Captain Raymond Holt in that show? You're a cop, Doug. Are you not a cop? Did you not watch Brooklyn Nine-Nine? Yeah. No. I know. I'm kind of comparing the captain to the guy he plays in this movie, Searles. It's crazy how different people they are. I know. I'm looking at his filmography, and I haven't seen him in a whole lot. Frequency was a movie that I've seen a bunch of times. That's a fun movie, with Jim Caviezel and Dennis Quaid. Yeah, he was in that one, obviously.
But he did a lot of work on TV. I think his bigger stuff was TV. Anyways, rest in peace, of course, to him and his family. I hope they have peace for that passing. What are your thoughts on Andre's acting as Corporal Thomas Searles?
I was absolutely shocked to find out that this was his first feature.
Yes.
He's great. He's great in portraying his character. Well-spoken, well-educated, black man, born free, comes from a free family in the North.
Yeah.
See, I don't know him that well. Like, I haven't seen him in enough things, so I don't know if he could have played like one of the Southern slaves, as good as the other guys do. I see
what you're saying. No, I think he could have. He was a very accomplished. I think I know what you're saying. Yeah, him being quote unquote the educated, the snowflake, as Triple called him, because he's he's part white. He's very white. The way he speaks as the other people would speak.
He called him Uncle Tom or
Uncle Tom. Yeah, sure. Yeah, he did an incredible job, and when he, of course, that big moment in the film where he goes, well, "Am I to hear there's going to be a colored regiment?" And
Rob, is it true? There's to be a colored regiment?
So it seems.
Then I am your first volunteer.
He displayed very, very raw, real emotions in his emotional scenes too.
Oh yeah, when he had to cry, lots of crying from Andre. There's that scene, of course, when he's being they were doing the bayonet training.
Yeah,
and John Finn's character says, hit me as hard as you can.
Yeah,
and he can't, and he knocks him out.
Jesus, Mary and Joseph, what have we here? Bonnie Prince Charlie and his little toy bayonet. You're not reading your books now. Go on, get over. Now stab me.
What?
Stab me. Come on, stab, not tickle. Hit me. Come on. You prissy little schoolgirl. You're the worst soldier in this whole company. Now hit me. No shame, son. Get up.
Robert, I'd like to speak to you for a moment in private, if I may.
Enlisted men wishing to speak to their commanding officer must first get permission. You understand, Private?
Yes, sir.
On guard! Thrust! Develop! Recover! Thrust! Develop! Recover! Thrust! Develop! Recover! On guard! Thrust! Develop! Recover! You better put some oomph into that boy.
I want to say this too about John Finn, the guy that played the drill sergeant. He did an amazing job as a drill sergeant. I'll say this, guys. You think it's mistreatment? Actually, I know it's partly because it's a film made in modern times, but he did a great job. I've been a drill sergeant. I'm in the military. I'm in the Navy, but I did 2 years as a drill sergeant or basic training instructor, as we call it here in Canada. But how he treated the recruits was legit.
Yeah.
Like, for example, when I first saw this movie as a kid or as a teenager, I was appalled that he would say, "Don't look at me," don't look at me when they're marching.
Mm-hmm.
Take your goddamn head out of your pocket, what's wrong with you, soldier? Left, right, left. Oh, look at this. Bonnie Prince Charlie. Are you a gentleman? Are you a member of Congress or something? Who are you, the bloody Prince of Africa? But don't look at me, look right ahead, look straight ahead. I'll eat your ass up, boyo.
But that's legit. I've literally yelled at my recruits for the same thing.
Yeah.
So when I'm giving them direction, like left, right, left, and I'm yelling at them, and they'll side eye me, I'll be like, "You." I'll be like, I'll cry like, "Don't you look at me, look straight ahead." Absolutely, yeah. Dude, now I wouldn't grab their face. That was one thing. I couldn't physically touch the students. Right. But them yelling to look ahead, that's legit. You do not look at the instructor when he's instructing. You do not look him in the eye. Absolutely. You never looked him in the eye. So when you're at attention, Doug, and you're dressing your the sergeant or drill sergeant or whatever, sir, yes, sir, you look through them.
Yeah,
You're the recruits. So me as an Army guy, or not Army, sorry, Navy or military personnel, I enjoyed John Finn's acting. I thought he did a great job. And the thing is, people mistake him. He actually wasn't racist. He was actually a very good instructor. That's when he said to Matthew Broderick's character at one point, he goes, how long have you known him? It was all my life or something.
I have no doubt that you are a fair man, Mulcahy. I wonder if you are treating these men too hard. You disagree? You may speak freely.
The boy's your friend, is he?
We grew up together, yes.
Let him grow up some more.
I see.
Will that be all, sir?
Yes. Dismissed.
It's because he actually cares about them. You can't coddle these guys. They're going to go to battle.
No, and I fully believe that he treats his white soldiers the exact same way. He called them colorful names,
sure.
But he would call the white soldiers
worthless Italian
piles of shit, and
if he had Jewish or Italian soldiers, I'm sure he would. He would have had a heyday with Italians and Jewish people too. Yeah, don't kid yourself. If you're not Irish, in fact, you have an Irish recruits, you probably would have called them a bunch of Irish names. So
when you're a recruit in boot camp, and me on a smaller scale, a recruit in a police academy, you are worthless. Okay, they have to strip you and break you down spiritually in order to build you back up into like a new fighter, a fighting soldier.
Let's hear what Ed had to say about Andre here.
One evening, after an exhausting day of seeing actors in Manhattan, she announced that if we hurried, we could make it to the senior showcase of graduating actors at Juilliard. There was someone she wanted me to see. We fought our way uptown in a torrential storm and found seats in the back row of the Peter J. Sharp Theater at Lincoln Center. Andre Braugher was nothing less than a revelation. I'd never seen such power and command in a young actor. His parents had wanted him to become an engineer, but everybody in that theater could tell his destiny was elsewhere. It made no difference that he'd never been on a movie set before. We cast him the next day as Corporal Thomas Searles.
Yeah. All right. Now let's move to Mr. Morgan Freeman. So did you know anything about Morgan Freeman before you saw this film?
I must have, because he didn't look like a stranger to me the first time I saw this, but I don't know what I would have seen him in.
Yeah, I don't think he did. I don't think we did. It's interesting. Morgan Freeman, he's a late bloomer to the industry. If you can believe, he's 87 now, by the way. Yeah, I think one of his big movies too, one of his first big movies, of course, was Driving Miss Daisy, for example.
Yeah.
This had to be the first movie I saw him in. I can't imagine it wasn't.
Yeah, it must have been with me too, but now we've seen him in so many things that he's always been familiar to us.
Yeah, if you look at his stuff before, there's nothing here I would have said, oh, that's where I saw him from. So Glory was his big break, because right after Glory was Driving Miss Daisy, then Lean on Me, and then all these other.
Oh, yeah.
Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves, he was great. He was great in that. I loved him in that. And then, of course, again, I'm a huge Western fan. I know one of these days I'm still going to do my Western podcast. It might be the one after this one, actually. But he was in Unforgiven with Clint Eastwood. Then he was in, of course, Seven with Brad Pitt. Morgan Freeman has endless roles of just being Morgan Freeman. But yeah, this would have been the first one. So I'm going to make that call, Doug. This is the first one that we both would have known him as an actor or seen him as an actor. Here's what Ed had to say about Morgan.
Freeman had made a strong impression on me as the terrifying pimp in Street Smart, so I didn't know what to expect when we met. He walked into my office, sat down, and gave me the warm, open smile that was to become his signature over the course of an extraordinary career. "You got me," was all he said. Thus began one of the most rewarding relationships I'd had yet with an actor, mostly because I hardly had to say a word. His performance as Sergeant Major John Rollins was spectacular from the first shot. Morgan had gone through tough times earlier in his career. He was quite open about it and even more vocal about the serenity he'd found in sobriety. His kind, steadying presence was something I came to rely on when things got tough.
Yeah, that tracks.
He also kind of played sort of a role in real life similar to his character. When Ed Zwick, he went to Morgan Freeman to kind of like get a temperature, how everybody's doing, if anybody needed anything on set, just like his character in the movie did with Colonel Shaw. This scene is...
Now, okay, guys, of course, if you're listening with kids in the car or whatever it is, I'm not going to edit it for the purposes of the podcast, because it is done by, of course, the actor in the film. The N-word is used, but I just want to give not safe for work or whatever, just a heads up. So, but this scene is incredible acting by Morgan Freeman. Trip is basically making fun of Searles, played by Andre, making fun of his character, calling him, making fun of him and saying you're just like, you look like a he's being derogatory. He's being racist towards Andre about his blackness in a sense because he's trying to take care of himself. He's trying to look smart in his uniform.
He's been egging him on the whole film.
Yes, that's right. Yeah, this is what the one-time thing.
He wants to fight him. He wants to fight him.
Yeah.
And he's just waiting for Searles to make the first move. Before you play this is another scene where it's focusing on Morgan Freeman because he's the one with the monologue, but I can't take my eyes off of Denzel Dorn.
You're right. I mean, yeah, there's the
his
acting all
reaction
around.
to everything.
Yeah.
Come on, Nick. All right. Hey, get your hands off me, grave digger.
God damn it. Does the whole world got to stomp in your face?
Nigga, you better get your hands off me.
Ain't no niggas around here, you hear me?
Oh, I see. So the white man give you a couple of stripes. Next thing you know, you hollering, ordering everybody around like you the master himself. Nigga, you ain't nothing but the white man's dog.
And what are you? So full of hate you just want to go out and fight everybody. Because you've been whipped and chased by hounds. Well, that might not be living, but it sure as hell ain't dying. And dying's what these white boys been doing for going on 3 years now. Dying by the thousands. Dying for you, fool. I know, because I dug the graves. And all the time I'm digging, I'm asking myself when, oh Lord, it's going to be our time. Well, time's coming when we're going to have to ante up. Ante up and kick in like men. Like men! You watch who you call a nigger. Then the niggers around here is you. Smart mouth, stupid ass, swamp running nigger. If you ain't careful, that's all you ever gonna be. You men going about your business.
Ooh, man, the acting from these. That is acting, Doug. That is what you call acting.
Yeah. Yeah, it is. That gave me chills too. Like,
yes,
all of these.
I know. We can just play the whole movie. We should probably just turn off the podcast. Everyone go watch the film. It's not better than what we're doing.
Get your popcorn. We'll have one of those
watch along.
Everybody watch. Yeah, watch alongs. Just continuing after Rollins walks away, the camera stays on Denzel, and as he lets his words sink in, it's a brilliant piece of acting again by Denzel. I can't wash his balls enough. He's just amazing.
Cup them and wash them, Doug. Cup them and wash them.
That whole monologue, there's only one character that can take control and really hit those words and make them hammer home to Trip, and that's Rollins.
All right, here's another something else Ed had to say about Morgan.
He never wanted to talk much about his scenes, yet he always managed to make known how he wanted me to stage them. One night, we were shooting the moment where Shaw comes to Morgan's character, Rollins, and asks for his help. As we rehearsed, I noticed that Morgan never once looked Matthew in the eye. Just as I was about to move the camera to catch his look, I realized that he was making the point of not looking at him. Not out of defiance, but as a black man who had lived a lifetime wary of being punished for being uppity, he couldn't risk being confrontational with his white superior. To watch him struggle with the dilemma of how to make it known to Shaw that the men need good shoes, and yet never meet his gaze, is a lesson in subtlety. Finally, as Shaw is walking away, Rollins can no longer contain himself. Shoes, he says, still looking straight ahead. The men need shoes. In that moment, a bond is formed between them, and for that, Shaw later names him the first black non-commissioned officer. Brad Pitt said something to me years later about Morgan after working with him on Seven. He's the master, Brad said. The thing about Morgan is you never see him move. Effortless at his acting. That's how I took that. It's just, you see him act in that movie, and it just seems like when Morgan acts, I think it's a combination of the timbre of his tone and his voice, the way he's able to enunciate words. It's every time he speaks, people always joke, like, if anyone could narrate my life, it'd be Morgan Freeman, because there's something about the way he speaks. And he's always, like, in the movies that he does later on, he's always like the stoic guy. He's always the guy that knows all the information. You know, you need something, you go to him. In this, he's like a submissive. He's like a guy that's uneducated. He's a guy that just barely making it through life as a, former slave. It's a weird contrast to what we know him as, but I mean, he doesn't miss a beat. So Jimmy, the actor Jimmy, who played Jupiter Sharts. Yes. This guy is the best character name. The way he acts, his name is, what's his name again? Jimmy Kennedy. Jimmy Kennedy. Have you ever seen this guy since or before? I've never seen him before or since. What an anomaly. Now he's been in stuff, but
His acting in this movie as this, I hate to say simple person,
Yeah,
but he's
yeah.
a little bit not too bright.
Good book, brother?
Yes, it is, actually. Name Searle. Thomas Searle.
Jupiter Shots. What about that book?
It's a collection of essays, actually. Fourier, Emerson, all the transcendentalists.
It got pictures?
No.
Teach me?
Yes, I'd be happy to.
Stutters. Yeah.
Stutters. He doesn't know his left from his right. That was a great moment by John Finn when he's teaching them how to march.
Company! Halt! For God's sake, man, do you not know your right from your left?
No, sir.
How many here do not know right from left? Jesus, pity. This is your front. This is your rear. This is your right. And this. Now you're learning, boyo. Company, forward, march. One.
Boy,
Yeah, you got it, boyo. Or now you're learning. Well, here's what Ed had to say about Jimmy.
Jimmy Kennedy was a graduate of the University of North Carolina School of the Arts. A well-trained actor, for years he had only managed to find work as a day player on TV series. Yet I sensed in him none of the telltale hunger of someone looking for his big break. Jimmy's audition was earnest and heartbreaking. As we got to know each other, I learned he was deeply religious. Faith would become a central underpinning of the movie. Jimmy's shone like a beacon. He became Private Jupiter Sharts, the fourth soldier in the tent.
His sweet innocence was such a. You just wanted to protect him. He was just a naive but sweet.
heartbreaking. The word that Ed Zwick used there was a perfect description of him, because like in that scene where he's shooting the glass bottles and then
Yes,
Gould is trying to get him to load his rifle and shoot quickly, which I understand Matthew Broderick's character was proving a point that it's great to load at your leisure and shoot at a glass bottle, but when you have to do it quickly when somebody's trying to kill you, he was just trying to make a point. And Jupiter Sharts didn't really understand that. He was scared. He was actually scared during that scene, and it was heartbreaking to see him like shaking and like jittery.
Attention! Company! Attention, company!
As you were. Front and center. You're a good shot, Private.
Thank you, sir. Squirrel hunting.
it's just right there. The idea of like, thank you, squirrel hunter. The idea like she shot squirrels. It's like the innocent,
meek. He's very meek.
But he's so proud of himself here because this is a very heartbreaking scene because he's got the adulation of his friends from the regiment. They're all cheering him on, making bets. Even Morgan Freeman's character is making bets like, you could give me 20 dimes or whatever it is.
Yeah.
20 cents.
Right now he's on top of the world, but
yeah. Yeah, right. He couldn't be happier with that big smile on his face. Oh, this is gonna be a good day for sure.
You ever killed a man?
No, sir.
But you're handy with a gun.
Yes, sir.
It's just what he's answering. Well, yes, sir. I'm handy with a gun. He's very happy, very proud of himself. This is a good day. He's talking to the CEO of the company. This is good.
Mm-hmm. Reload.
Happily reloads. Gets his ammunition. He's smiling still.
Oh yeah.
He's like, I'll show them, everyone. Puts it in and
Faster.
he's like, yeah, okay, I can go faster. He goes a little bit faster. He's like, oh, sure.
Faster.
Now he starts to pat
Faster.
Yeah. Now he's panicking.
He's like, why is he yelling at me? What's going on? I thought I was doing good. I thought I was.
Discharge your weapon. Discharge your weapon. Do it! Now do it again. Only this time, I want it done quickly.
Again, he's training them properly. This is proper. And he tells the men, hey, everyone, you can fire 3 aim shots in a minute, which is crazy back then, Doug. The fighting.
No, 3 shots in a minute.
And then, of course, he asked for the revolver from his 2IC.
Give it to me.
And now we're all thinking as we're watching it for the first time, he's going to, what's he doing with the gun?
He's going to execute him.
Reload.
Now, this would be frightening.
Quickly.
Yeah.
Faster.
That right there, the jumping. He's frightened.
Faster. Do it. Do it.
And he just stops. Panic attack. He can't do it. He just
drops the ramrod.
Yep. He doesn't even finish. He can't load.
No. Now right there, his shaky hand reaches up to take the
ammunition paper out. And he's got gunpowder on his lip, which I love too. It's a very subtle, but you can see the gunpowder on his lip from taking the packet out with his mouth. Yeah, an amazing scene by Jimmy. Amazing. All right, we won't play the clip that he talks about Carrie, but basically, long story short, regarding Carrie, only a very short thing to say that Carrie Ewells is how you say his last name, Owls or Ewells?
Elwes.
Elwes. Sorry, I can never say it. He was in The Princess Bride, of course. Ed Zwick loved him in The Princess Bride, and he was just very happy that Carrie's like, no, I want to be in this film. Took a cut and paste, and I'm going to be on this film. Believed in the project from the beginning, and I suspect Carrie was already a seasoned actor, just gave Ed no problems whatsoever, and he was great in the film. What did you think of Carrie in the film?
Yeah, he was great. He was great. He did The Princess Bride before this. He was the lead actor in that. So
for him to take a secondary role, to so to speak,
but he didn't try to like show up anybody. He knew the assignment too.
Yeah, he did. It's interesting because he took a second role to Matthew Broderick, so within the film, but also within the billing of the film. So no, Carrie did great, and there was no real story. I suspect there was no stories to share. I think Ed would just. I think he basically said Carrie was great, and everything you saw, he did well. So there's some really great. I can't recommend this book highly enough, folks. So obviously, I don't want to play the whole chapter that he does in Glory. I mean, trust me, I can't. It's like 40 minutes long, but he just gave great accolades, is what I'll say. There's a clip, but I just not for sake of time won't play it. But he gives some great accolades regarding the four main black actors that we've spoken about: Jimmy, Andre, Morgan, and Denzel. Basically, what Ed Zwick said, those four were the tent pole. They were the spirit of. They were the whole movie. Everything hinged on their performances. And he did mention, boy, I'm going to say, I'm going to share a clip.
Play it.
Okay.
With Denzel, Morgan, Jimmy, and Andre had begun. It's possible that four other actors might have had the same kind of chemistry they did, but I doubt it. It was mesmerizing. Everybody had something to contribute to the scenes. As we began to do improvisations, Jimmy stayed in character the whole time. Andre was tentative at first, but gradually began to feel safe. Watching his creation of the character of Searles was dazzling. Denzel was more restrained. I sensed him feeling his way toward Trip. He wasn't yet ready to take the plunge. One scene we worked on was the impromptu prayer meeting the enlisted men hold on the eve of going into battle. I had seen Morgan preach in the gospel at Colonus at the Brooklyn Academy of Music. He could thunder like hellfire and just as quickly murmur words as comforting as a soothing balm. Jimmy attended the local Baptist church on his days off. Jimmy invested the character of Sharts with his own pure, simple belief. I knew Denzel's father was a Pentecostal preacher who ran two churches. But when it came his turn during rehearsal to testify, he stuck to the script, often mumbling, revealing little of what was going on inside. At first, I was confused, even a bit anxious, yet the other actors didn't seem to mind at all. This, I would come to understand, was Denzel's process. He was preparing, and in the meantime, he was simply incapable of doing anything inauthentic. What he'd be like on the day, I'd have to wait and see. They were hearing music I couldn't even imagine. Yet during each session, a transcendent moment, usually unwritten, would occur.
This part I just want to point out is really, really, I think a real special moment. This is the part I really wanted to focus on. Though what we just heard was really cool, but this is just Ed just reminiscing about how these four guys brought this movie together.
It was at once thrilling and daunting, like realizing you're on a runaway train to an unknown destination. The best thing I could do, I realized, was shut up and hold on tight. Any worries I might have had about being a white kid presuming to tell black men about their experience had vanished by the end of the first rehearsal. If a line in the script didn't work, they massaged it, or instinctively came up with a better one. Dialogue I feared might be cliched made them laugh. The racial slurs they came up with were much worse than anything I had dared write.
Yeah, and I would suspect that part that we played with Morgan Freeman's character.
Loud mouth, small yeah.
I don't think Ed wrote that. That's what he's saying. Right. He's like, I'm not going to write that. And that's what he's saying is they came up with the stuff that they needed to for their characters.
Amazing.
Voices of their parents and grandparents, of ancestors they'd never met, were so available to them. They fell into their rhythms with good humor and without the slightest self-consciousness, just as I might have done if imitating my immigrant grandfather. I scribbled notes constantly, stealing bits of dialogue, of behavior from an improv that I could repurpose while shooting. When I did have an idea about a scene, their attitude was unflaggingly receptive and generous. Why I was surprised by this reveals the depth of my own anxiety and prejudice. I count those days in a dingy rehearsal room as the true beginning of my career as a film director.
So there you go. That's when he started to feel like a film director.
That's one of the excerpts that I time-stamped because
Okay, good.
How deep and meaningful, like his own prejudice being exposed because he didn't realize that the black actors could do what they were doing.
Yeah, well, it's tough. Like, let's be honest. I mean, to write such a sensitive. You have Kevin Jarre is white, who wrote the screenplay. Edward Zwick is white. They're not black people, and they're writing dialogue and history and emotions to like what's their experience in this field. And the fact that the actors kind of knew they were dealing with this, they didn't begrudge him, they didn't mistreat him, they didn't say, "Oh, you know what it's like to be us. You don't understand what it's like to." They embraced this whole story because it went beyond Edward Zwick's directing. They knew the story that was being shared was more important than any kind of egos or color, who's making the costumes, who's directing the film, who's the editor. It didn't matter. They're the actors. They're the black actors. And like you're talking about before, they knew their mission and they totally killed. Was there a bad acting scene by really anyone, let alone the four main black actors? I mean, they were just insanely good.
They were, yeah.
We are going to get to Matthew Broderick. Hang in there, folks. But before we do, let's talk about that prayer meeting. What are your thoughts on that prayer meeting?
You know, watching it, not knowing any of the backstory, just what in good spirits these guys were in, kind of knowing that they're going into their death.
It's crazy.
You know? And the way I've never been to like one of those Baptist churches that's all about, you know, the singing and the chanting and everything, but you can tell that these guys are, you know, that how they live, that's how they grew up, that's what they're used to. Because like the stuff that they come up with saying, like Jupiter Sharp saying, you know, let me fight with the rifle in one hand and the good book in the other. Go for it.
I don't know about you, but I love the singing. I always I love how everyone stops to do the part to give someone a chance to talk. I love that. Yeah. They kind of keep the beat going. I love it. I just love it.
The backstory to this, oh my Lord.
Let's play it. Let's play that first then. Actually, let's play that.
The prayer meeting, known as The Shout, wasn't supposed to be shot for weeks, but a sudden schedule change obliged us to get it without any warning or preparation. I hadn't come up with a tune for the men to sing, nor had the composer's team had time to build a click track. We didn't even have a pitch pipe. In such circumstances, there's only one thing to do: fake it. By this point in the production, the dress extras had become the de facto face of the regiment, a kind of mute chorus always to be found strategically placed around the principals. Their esprit de corps was remarkable. Uncomplaining whether trudging through fetid swamps, being knocked around in hand-to-hand combat, or making up profane marching songs as they tried to keep dry in one of the wettest Georgia springs on record. I'll refrain from quoting some of their more profanity-laced ditties, most of them referencing the asshole director who was forcing them to stand for hours in the pouring rain.
I love that. Yeah, I love how he references himself that way.
Yeah.
Verse ending with a dirty rhyme for Zwick. But it was this irreverent tune that became the basis for one of the most moving moments in the film. All it took was a quick rewrite from the blasphemous to the biblical. Fucking rain, 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 rain became, oh my Lord, 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 Lord.
I love that. So what I love about this is they took lemons and they made lemonade out of that scenario where they're in these, you know, terrible conditions. They're getting dumped on, rained on, and they're singing songs about the weather. And Ed Zwick's like, hey, I think I like that singing. Yeah. Keep it up, guys. Well, let's change the lyrics a little bit though for the movie.
It sounds like something that would have been sung back then.
And then of course he goes into Jimmy, and I love, and we're going to see it when we get to the prayer meeting video when we go back to it. But Jimmy, when he does his testimony, that's him, that's the actor.
Yeah, that wasn't written.
No.
And I also found it kind of refreshing because he's been like this quiet, meek character, but here he's confident. You know, he's the first one to step up and testify with confidence, you know?
Absolutely right, because as an actor and within his character, this is his this is his strength, or this is where he
Wheelhouse,
excels,
yeah.
is the spirituality, religion. This is his home turf. So absolutely, he's going to kind of lead the chorus of testimonies.
And voila, a spiritual was born. We shot all night in a freezing drizzle. If you look closely, you can see the condensation of the men's breath as they huddle together to keep warm. Jimmy was the first to testify. His words in the scene, as with the other actors, were mostly his own.
That's awesome.
With his shining face lit from within, his eyes focused heavenward, he set the tone with a simple, unadorned speech.
I just love the way he presents it. His eyes are kind of bugged out a little bit. It's just, it feels real. It feels real. Like they kind of caught on camera a real testimony meeting.
Morgan was up next. When he'd preached in the gospel at Colonus, it was an artfully written, rehearsed performance. He'd had no time to prepare for this night, yet the speech he improvised was magnificent. And when he reached its epiphany, with a beatific smile, and began to clap in double time, you could feel the spirit rising to his call. Then it was Denzel's turn. I had no idea what he was going to say. There were lines written, but he didn't need them. Despite his background in his father's church, he'd never really taken part in our improvs for the scene. But as he stood before the other actors, feeling their love and encouragement, his alienation became his subject, and his truth. The shout is my favorite scene in the movie. I'd like to think it not only captures the belief and sacrifice of the characters, but also the commitment of those who made it.
Tomorrow, we go into battle. So, Lordy, let me fight with the rifle in one hand and good book in the other. That if I should die at the muzzle of the rifle, die on water or on land, I may know that you, blessed Jesus Almighty, are with me.
We see you.
And I have no fear. Amen.
I love the way he says or enunciates the on land. I just love the way he says that part. I don't know why he's just such a sweetheart. I just love it. I just love it. Okay, now let's talk about the score. Then we're going to get to Matthew. So overall, what's your feelings on the? We'll just say it again, but well, actually, let's hear the words of Ed, and we'll comment on what he said about the score because we've already sort of spoken to it. So let's hear what he says first.
Back to working with James Horner on the score. Glory was the first of several films he and I were to do together. His combination of mastery and sensitivity was exactly right. How to give a musical voice to a story? That's the challenge presented to a composer when he first looks at an unfinished film. Inevitably, there are certain mundane tasks to be addressed, a transition to be smoothed by a musical sleight of hand, a sequence that can be better knitted together to help underline a theme or a relationship. But not until that mysterious process begins, when the composer sits alone at his keyboard and out of absolute stillness dares move his fingers across the same 12 keys that have been struck by composers for hundreds of years, does a kind of alchemy begin. Some magical process of passion, pain, instinct, and craft crystallizes as a musical phrase emerges that manages to express something far beyond the limitation of words, or a melody seems to materialize from the deepest part of an actor's soul. I'd always imagined using the sound of boy sopranos in Glory. To me, the innocence in their voices evoked the purity of the men's belief. James agreed, and we began inquiring about English boys' choruses. It was Freddie Fields who came up with the idea of the Boys' Choir of Harlem. The studio was suddenly feeling bullish about the movie's prospects, so we were able to convince them to fly 80 boys and their director, Walter J. Turnbull, out to L.A. for the session. For many of them, it was their first time on a plane. We recorded the score over 3 days on the famous Lionel Newman stage at MGM. The sound of a 100-piece orchestra, topped off by a chorus of angelic voices, endowed the images with a grace and tragedy no dialogue could ever express. Neither before or since have I seen a room full of jaded Hollywood session musicians in tears. Word spread on the lot. and other directors began dropping in. At one point, while trading on the privilege of sitting among the orchestra to listen, I happened to glance back toward the engineer's booth, and at various times saw that Paul Mazursky, Bob Zemeckis, and Steven Spielberg had stopped by to observe. It felt like my bar mitzvah. In some sense, I suppose it was.
Yeah. I mean, what else do you say? I mean, it's
just the fact that other people were dropping in just to like sit in on the score that shows you something, that they were on the right track the whole time. Having the Harlem Boys Choir too was nice.
Perfect. Yeah, I mean, it wasn't pandering. It just made sense. Let's have a black choir sing. I assumed it was a black choir from Harlem. Yeah, it's more than appropriate. And it was so beautiful. I mean, the session musicians, the people performing the music, were crying. Yeah. The music does that, man. There's something about this music. I don't know how people get through without crying. They must have been.
I'm a score guy, like I love musical scores. I'm a huge Star Wars fan, and I love the score in Star Wars, but the score in Star Wars doesn't ever bring me to tears, really. You know what I mean? It's a beautiful score, but like this really drums up some emotion, man.
Well, let's get to the part of the film that makes most of the men cry, especially me. Of course, it's right at the end. So, of course, they had the big battle, the dead bodies on the beach. Mm-hmm. And there's that choir, Doug.
Mm-hmm. Sounds like ghostly voices over a graveyard,
But angels at the same time. Kind of saying, you did well. You did well, boys.
Yeah.
And this part always kills me because it's the enemy flag going up. You know what that flag, that means they lost. They didn't win the battle.
They didn't take the fort.
No. Well, the body's been disposed of. Now, this is a interesting point of history here.
Accurate.
Yeah, is having Robert Shaw buried with the black soldiers was actually supposed to be an insult to Robert to be buried with black people. It was actually an insult to have that happen to him.
You notice the Confederates took all their shoes too?
Yes, that's right. Good call. Good catch. I mean, yeah. I love that voice change. The tone change, the body of Shaw being picked up. He rolls down the... Oh. Of course, Trip is thrown on top of him. Mm-hmm. I mean, do you feel it?
I got the chills. Yeah, I feel it. Interesting, real historical tidbit. Later on after the war, Gould's family was asked if they want his body exhumed and given a proper burial up in Boston, and his father refused. He said, no, he's right where he's meant to be among the soldiers that he commanded, and respected him.
Well said. Now, I know this is I have to treat this film, for better or for worse, as I'm going to do with all the films in Ed Zwick's film career, meaning like we could spend 10 hours on this film.
Oh my God. Easily.
Like we could do it minute by minute, Doug. We could do it minute by minute.
Yeah,
and I could, and I would love to do that maybe one day. Maybe we will. Maybe Doug and I will do it minute by minute, just me and you. Anyways, we'll get to that later. However, this is more of just like we did with About Last Night. We talked about the actors, what the film meant to us. We're not going to go scene by scene. We're not going to play every scene because it's just go watch the movie. I can't say that enough. Even with About Last Night, I was saying if you can listen to that episode. If you haven't seen the movie, we really didn't spoil anything. Go watch it. Enjoy it. It's fun. Mm-hmm. This movie too, go watch it again. If it's been a long time, go watch it again. But now we're going to talk about something that I did not know about until I read the book, is Matthew Broderick. Now, before we get to Edward Zwick's account of Matthew Broderick, what are your thoughts on him in the film?
An odd choice, I felt, because I've only known him as Ferris Bueller before this in a goofy comedy.
And you were even a little bit younger than me, and I was 14, so I was like a mid-teenager, so I was very aware of who he was and knew him as a comedy kind of actor, like a lighthearted type actor from the Ferris Bueller and some other films, Biloxi Blues, stuff like that. And so I knew that he was a sort of a comedic type actor.
Yeah.
But the moment he begins talking in the narration of his, well, that opening sequence of the battle when he's getting fixed up in the infirmary there, I was bought in. I will say this, despite some of the things we're going to share, especially people don't know about this, he was absolutely amazing in this film.
Yeah. His dialogue scenes it didn't capture me as much as his nonverbal scenes. He
was very good nonverbal.
Like the one we covered with Trip getting flogged, that his nonverbal acting in that at the end, remember when he's standing by the ocean and he jumps off the horse and he lets the horse go and he's just staring at the ocean, the look on his face, the thoughts, that's a very powerful 30 seconds or so of film. He's looking out into the serene ocean with the seagulls. Meanwhile, there's bombs exploding over his shoulder at the fort. It's like a really beautiful, like deep scene, completely nonverbal.
Looking at the ocean for one last time.
Of course, the score highlighting it.
Yeah, this is the theme. He's holding back tears.
Yeah.
And he's looking back over at the fort that they're about to storm. He knows that death is coming. There's that score. And then the change in the scores as he steals his resolve is like, here we go. Yeah. We're doing it.
Those are the moments that I really appreciate him in this film.
And he did have a passing resemblance to the real life person. Have you seen the photos of Robert Shaw?
Yeah, very youthful looking guy.
Yeah. I mean, they're about the same age at the time of filming and had a goatee there. And he looks just like Robert Shaw to some degree. I thought Matthew was great, but I'm a little surprised about, here we go.
Yeah, we've talked the good. Now we got to get to the bad and the ugly.
Yeah, unfortunately. Here we go.
No matter how impressed the studio was by the script or by the footage we'd shown them, they agreed to go forward for only one reason. Matthew Broderick agreed to play Robert Gould Shaw. This might seem bizarre, given that Matthew's stardom in Hollywood's estimation had come only recently because of Ferris Bueller's Day Off, a delightful John Hughes movie, but as different in tone from Glory as any two movies could be. Also that Matthew's box office appeal, such as it might be, was probably limited to teenage girls. But this is often how studios think. They needed a marquee name, as it was explained to me, to protect their downside. This isn't to take anything away from Matthew's ability. I considered him an extremely talented actor and could certainly imagine him doing the part.
Which he did. And we talked about that. So I was right. Like, this is his product on the film. I don't think was ever in question. I don't think, in fact, did you catch any of that through Ed's description of Matthew, that what was shown on screen was poorly done?
No, in no way did it seem like he wasn't all in.
Yeah. But so people are like, what are you guys talking about? Well, keep listening, I guess.
He was also roughly the same age as Shaw, and even bore a passing resemblance. The problem was that the studio actually told Matthew they were only making the movie because of him. This was a horrible thing to do to a young actor. To have such a huge psychological burden placed on his shoulders was the opposite of how he should have been made to approach a difficult part in an arguably risky movie. Matthew was already carrying quite a heavy karmic burden for someone his age.
Now, did you know the story that was coming up about what he experienced at a young age?
No. I had no idea.
Yeah, so this is what makes it a little bit, I would say, not heartbreaking is the right word, but just like Matthew at this young age. So he was told basically, look, you're the star of this film. We're doing this film because of you. This film is right on your shoulders. And this is kind of how they hyped him up for it. Mm-hmm. And then he experienced this as well at the same time.
The year before, While driving with Jennifer Grey in Ireland en route to pick up his mother at the airport, he had veered into the wrong lane and hit an oncoming car head-on, killing its driver and passenger. Matthew himself had suffered serious injuries. Resilient and mentally tough, he had gotten through it.
Crazy.
That's insane. So he's been carrying that burden. I know you can actually Google it, and there's some real tragedy there. I believe the family sued or he settled or something like that. But what a terrible burden to carry, that you're careless. Essentially, wasn't criminal. He wasn't drunk, but it was careless driving, or he crossed lanes. He went into the oncoming traffic, probably fooling around with Jennifer. Who knows, right? Look, they're young kids, probably fooling around with Jennifer, kissing her or something. They were dating. He hit a car, and the other two people died. It could have just been easily him and Jennifer that died, but it was a poor mother-daughter combo that died.
Still, it's hard to imagine the lingering price he must have paid. Now finding himself about to make an ambitious movie, Matthew felt he needed help. Unfortunately, he didn't think I was the person who could give it to him. I can understand why he was wary of me from the start. He had won a Tony at 21 and was accustomed to rarefied New York circles. To that way of thinking, I was a lightweight. I'd only made one feature, a romantic comedy set in Chicago's bar scene.
Yeah, go check out episode 1 of the podcast, folks, where Katie and I cover that film that Edward was referring to. It's a good episode.
Most of all, I was a TV guy. What did I know about filmmaking on an epic scale? Admittedly, I had done little to suggest I could handle the logistics, the stars, or the spectacle. And while I have no idea who was whispering in Matthew's ear, I know enough about the legions of ass-kissers and ego-strokers who attach themselves to a rising star that I can imagine what he was being told. You should be working with Spielberg. You need a big director. You need to be protected. A short time after Matthew agreed to do the movie, he suddenly announced he was quitting. I couldn't have known there were other forces influencing him, one of whom was his mother, Patsy, who had read the script and hated it.
It's so crazy that his mother was so involved with this and in his ear as well. So she reads the script and says, "This is garbage.
Yeah.
Why are you doing this film?"
Yeah.
At this point, Patsy was still off stage, her unseen hand unknown to all. Matthew and I hadn't even met in person yet. He was in Manhattan, and I was with my wife and son in a little cabin at 9,000 feet in Crested Butte, Colorado. My only means of communication with Matthew was an ancient radio phone I had inherited from the previous owner. As with a walkie-talkie, it was necessary to hold down the PTT, push-to-talk button, and then say, over, when you wanted the other party to speak.
This is very telling here. So here he is. He's, on vacation with his family. They're about to go filming. He's got a star. He's talking to the main star on this push-to-talk phone. I've talked on satellite phones before on a Navy ship, and you have to do that because if even if the other person laughs, it interrupts your part of the call. So you have to remain silent. Let the person say. So when I talked to my ex-wife back in the day on those satellite phones, when I was sailing, you'd have to be like, "How are the kids? Over." And then she would be like, "Oh, we're doing okay. Da, 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 da. Over. Hey, that's wonderful to hear, honey. How are you doing? Over." And so that's what Ed's saying here, that he had to do with but Matthew in a bit of a power play, or I'm not going to do that kind of. It's kind of telling a little bit like, why are you not? We got to be able to communicate properly. Why are you not doing over as well? It was beneath him, I think, and that's the feeling I got.
So it seems like
The connection was crackly and sporadic, and it always seemed at its worst when we'd speak. One day it broke down altogether, and I had to snowshoe 2 miles down the mountain in a blizzard to a payphone to hear Jeff tell me that Matthew was quitting again. Calm down, Jeff. What happened? He's trashing the script, says it needs a complete rewrite. Okay, I'll call him. I called Matthew. The radio phone was working again. Hi, Matthew. I hear you want to talk about the script. Over. Yeah, well, I have a lot of notes. He neglected to say over. In fact, in all our conversations on the radio phone, he petulantly refused to say it. So I never quite knew when he was done talking or it was time for me to PTT. Let me hear your notes. I really want to know what you're thinking. Over. As Matthew went through the script, his thoughts were all about his character. No surprises there, but there was something unspoken, something he didn't want to get into. And no matter how I tried to pry it loose, he remained vague and taciturn. As I understood them, his notes weren't extensive, and they felt doable. It certainly didn't sound like he was trashing the script. I told him I'd dig into the scenes and send him pages. He seemed satisfied and clearly wanted to get off the phone. I said, over and out, and we hung up. He was back in the movie, for now.
This sort of sets the tone here of kind of off to a rocky start, wouldn't you say, Doug?
Yeah, very rocky. You go into this project with a chip on your shoulder immediately. Where do you go from there?
So his mother, I think at this time, where we find out later, the mother's squeaking into his ear. She was not interested in this being a black film. It was about the 54th Regiment. She was more interested about this being Matthew Broderick's big Oscar-winning moment type film. So let's get him more scenes.
She wanted like a whole background scene of him as a kid and everything. But
yeah, there's a lot of scenes that they wanted to film that Ed decided, I can't remember if it's in the clips or not, so I'll just speak to it now really quickly, that there were some scenes where they did film extra for Matthew, but it comes into play later what they did with them.
Then, out of nowhere, a production assistant came sprinting toward us across the dunes. When he caught his breath, he announced that Jeff Sagansky had called the production office to say it was an emergency and that I was to call him back immediately. This was 1989, remember. There were no cell phones. Part of the location manager's job was carrying a roll of dimes for payphones. But there were no payphones on the beach, and the production office was miles away. I had no choice but to take off across the dunes. There was only one emergency that would prompt that kind of call. Matthew was unhappy again. He says you didn't respond to his notes, Jeff pleaded. Of course I did. Well, he sent the script to Horton Foote, who says it has all kinds of problems. Maybe we should start considering other actors for the part, I said. Kevin Bacon is available. Matthew is already...
You know, it's funny that, again, I'm glad Matthew's in this film. It's almost a little... It's disheartening to hear the tumultuousness that he gave Ed and the crew regarding this film's production. Now, I should state that Ed said in the book that he has forgiven Matthew Broderick, that he holds no ill will, but he said for the sake of the story, he has to talk about what he went through. It would be disingenuous for him to not share the difficult time that it was, but since then that, you know, they've made amends. I mean,
right.
You pay or play, you've got to call him. I'll call him. I knew that Matthew and the heralded screenwriter of To Kill a Mockingbird were close. Matthew had acted in Foote's The Widow Clare off Broadway, and then starred in the film adaptation of his play 1918. He was also currently dating Foote's daughter, Daisy. That close. Horton Foote was also a third cousin of Shelby Foote, whose Civil War histories I so admired. I called Matthew, asking directly if Horton Foote wanted to talk to me about the script. Matthew hedged and changed the subject. Again, I tried to get him to articulate his problems with the script. He kept mentioning Emerson. I knew that Ralph Waldo Emerson had been the soul of the abolitionist movement into which Shaw was raised, but I still couldn't understand what Matthew was getting at. Fly down this week and let's get into it, I said. I'm not sure when I'm coming down, he said. I've got a lot going on up here.
I just want to say Ed does a good Matthew Broderick there. He kind of mimicked his voice pretty good there. Did you catch that? The little tone change that he did there?
The first time I didn't notice it, but this time I caught it a little bit.
He just does a little bit of a Matthew Broderick voice there. I kind of like that.
It was dawning on me that Matthew didn't like confrontation. But by the end of the call, it was clear he wasn't walking off the movie. We were to have several more of these long, awkward, circular conversations. But what I hoped would be a substantive opportunity to hear him out always seemed to dissipate into something vague and purposeless. Later, I'd hear how unhappy he was with the call. Still, I imagined once we got to the starting gate he would find his footing. I'd seen it happen before with actors whose anxiety would rise the closer we got to shooting and then disappear the minute the camera started to roll.
So again, this is all pre-production. Is that what I'm getting here?
Yeah, that's what it seems like.
They haven't filmed anything.
They haven't even started.
As the saying goes, you never hear the bullet that hits you. If I was wrong in fearing my relationship with the black actors could be fraught, I was even more wrong in assuming it would eventually work out with Matthew. Because the next day, I got a message that Bo Goldman had called. He told me that Matthew had sent him the script and asked him to rewrite it. Was this something I endorsed?
think about that for a second. Look, think about the script, Doug. You can't just rewrite it. It's the whole film, production sites, the actors, the other actors who have to learn lines, costume changes, whatever, like the scenery. Just the fact that now I know Matthew was young, but the fact that he just gave the script to someone else saying, "Hey, Ed Zwick agrees that he should rewrite."
Could you rewrite this? Yeah.
If I had any actor, I don't care if you're Brad Pitt, Leo, it doesn't matter. If you're telling me to rewrite the script because the director says so, hey, Quentin told me you can rewrite this.
Yeah,
I would definitely call the director just to confirm. I'd be like, am I rewriting your script? I got the actor telling me to do that. It's a little sus, as the kids say.
Was speechless. Well, you've got something else to worry about, he said. Matthew says he needs his mother to come down here and work with you on the script. His mother? She wants to meet with you about the script. Apparently she's some kind of writer. His mother? Ovitz insists we fly her to Savannah every weekend on a private jet. She'll be there on Saturday. When Patricia Broderick arrived that weekend, Patsy, as she was called, was a brilliant woman. A painter and playwright of some success, but never with the recognition she felt was her due. We met, Matthew, Patsy, and I, in my office for hours on end, going through the script page by page. Although I'm sure she was capable of warmth and charm, I was never treated to that side of her.
But I love how it kind of gives her a little bit of like, yeah, maybe she has that capability to be warm and kind to people. It just never happened with me.
Yeah.
I got a feeling he's being very diplomatic. I bet you she probably was a cankerous personality in general.
He probably wanted to use a few other choice words.
Yeah.
From the moment we met, she was contemptuous, demeaning, and volatile. As Matthew sat in opaque silence, I was forced to defend in excruciating detail my rationale for every line in every scene. Patsy knew an enormous amount about the Transcendentalists, but not so much about screenwriting. She insisted on elongating the first act to include a scene at Brook Farm, the utopian community that was the incubator of abolitionism. Also, that Shaw's dialogue should include long passages of, wait for it, Emerson. At least now I understood why Matthew kept bringing him up in our calls.
It's because you got the mother. This is how it's all coming together here. She's behind the scenes beacon, and a lot of this probably didn't necessarily always have to do with Matthew. I think he was probably between two worlds. Let's pretend the mother, for example, was just, this is amazing, Matthew. You're in this awesome movie with Ed Zwick and Glory. This is a great message, great movie. Go get him, Tiger. He probably wouldn't have been difficult with Ed. So that's why I want to talk about this. I think a lot of the behavior that Matthew was showing was he was torn between his mother's love or adoration and working on this film. I think that the mother was just completely on board with the vision of Ed.
I agree with you 100%. Okay. I think a lot, and it shows when he said he wanted Emerson in his lines, but couldn't kind of articulate why. Is because he wasn't getting all the information or it was getting mixed messages from his mom, or the wires were crossed somewhere. So he couldn't articulate it, but he was speaking his mom's words.
Yeah, that's right. He's like, throw in Emerson, would you?
Yeah.
Ed's like, what? Why? I don't know. I think it'd be good.
She also maintained we needed to add Shaw reading from Harriet Beecher Stowe's anti-slavery polemic Uncle Tom's Cabin, watch him training troops in front of the admiring ladies of Boston, see him attend a famous speech by Frederick Douglass, and most of all, play a long scene in which he is convinced to take command of the regiment by, you guessed it, his mother.
Yeah.
Can you imagine if all that was filmed and kept in the film? The film would be 3 hours to 4 hours long.
Yeah, I know. I thought about all that too. It was a 2-hour film as it is.
But it doesn't go by slow at all. In fact, it's almost, I could easily have it been longer. But that being said, not with these scenes.
No, this would have brought it to a halt. Like a courting scene with his wife or girl.
It's not necessary. Yeah, it's not necessary. It doesn't do anything for it's a story about the 54th. It's not a story about Robert Shaw.
Exactly.
One of the many ironies of the sad saga with Patsy is that I had known her late husband, James, quite well. A wonderful actor and an amiable pro, he had starred in Family, where we had worked together happily. He had died of cancer only a few years before, at age 55. Clearly, my friendship with Matthew's father had done nothing to endear me to his mother. Patsy was relentless in her criticism, and I fought her at every turn, doing my best to ignore her profanity and insults. One of her choicer comments was to describe my writing as limp as a penis.
You know what's funny? I don't think she's ever seen one that's not limp in her presence. It's like nobody can be excited when she's around.
Patsy believed her son to be in imminent danger and had come to defend him with no holds barred. Jeff had mentioned in passing that Patsy had been sick, that she had survived lung cancer and triple bypass surgery only a few years before. I was fighting with a sick woman. This at least explained some of her extreme behavior. Yet did it mean I had to allow her to savage the script? In retrospect, I can see we were both desperate. Had I understood it then, I might have been more compassionate. It must have been excruciating for Matthew. He was in an impossible position too, obviously concerned for his mother's health, and only a few years past his father's death, not to mention the trauma of the car accident, yet he hardly said a word. He already had no respect for me. Seeing me go toe-to-toe with his mother could only have made him hate me more.
What a terrible time for Ed.
Yeah.
And for Matthew, it seems like, too.
Yeah, he was in an impossible position.
A sad tale all around, but we've got one last clip here, Doug, but this one's key. So basically what's happening now, folks, so with the Matthew story, essentially, as you can see, the mother was the issue, driving these points home to Matthew, who's already gone through the loss of his father, that terrible, tragic car accident, his mother who's just yelling and screaming at the director that he has to work with. But despite that all, the film gets filmed. We get the performances out of Matthew, so say kind of what you want about the mother end or about Matthew Broderick allowing the mother. He could have said, Mom, back off, stay out of my business. So to some degree, he enabled the mother to cause this. So that's on Matthew as well, because he's an adult, a young adult, but he's still an adult. He could say, Mom, go away. You're destroying my chances on this film. But despite all that, he did a great job in the film.
Yeah, they got all the shots. They filmed all the shit that
Ed did say that he conceded on some things. They filmed things, but when they watched the dailies after, he mentioned they were unwatchable. It was a horrible thing to watch. They filmed it, they did it, and then they watched it afterwards. Like, we cannot put this in the film, and they didn't. So now we're going to fast forward. The film is done. It's in the can. It's been shown to the executives. People love it, but right now Matthew and his mother have yet to see it. So what happened here is Ed was told, "Hey, Matthew Broderick's in Toronto, Canada, filming with Brando and Hoffman." What was the movie called again? I can't remember. Family Plan or something like that, or the Heist, The Freshman.
Yes, The Freshman.
That's right.
It was the something.
Again, I saw this film because I thought it was great. I saw this after Glory, and I enjoyed Matthew. Here's the thing: I actually think Matthew's I like him. I think he's a good actor. I think he's very talented, and I just think he was just very young. Like we said, they have buried the hatchet. Everything's fine now, but this is still just a story then. So he's flown to Toronto. He's got the film reel in his hand. He's ready to show it to Matthew and the mom. He bumps into some of the co-stars of Matthew in the elevator at the hotel.
Took the red eye and stumbled into the hotel for a quick shower. In the elevator, on the way down, I ran into Dustin Hoffman. He and Sean Connery were starring with Matthew in Family Business, to be directed by Sidney Lumet.
Oh, Family Business. Sorry, I was thinking of a different one. Family Business.
We were both wrong. All right.
Oh, no, this was just, sorry. This came out the same year as Glory, but it was filmed after. That's right, because there would have been more post-production probably on a movie like Glory. Family Business was a smaller film. That's right. This was Sean Connery and Dustin. So Matthew was with some big names, eh?
Yeah.
Yeah, because then he did the Freshman with Marlon, which was a great film too. Okay.
Dustin was very chatty. We had reconciled after our bust-up on Drawing Fire. He smiled mischievously and said, "I heard you were coming." Before I could glean his subtext, the elevator doors opened.
So we got Dustin saying, "I heard you're coming." So Matthew with probably the mom for sure, Patsy, talked Ed up. Oh yeah, Ed's coming with the film.
Yeah, it's just talking off Dustin's ear about it.
Yeah, my son's never worked with that guy again. Or like, so Dustin's laughing at him. "I heard you're coming." He's like, "What does he mean by that?" Oh, poor Ed. But it's okay. He's got a great film, right, Doug? So this should go fine.
Yeah.
There was Matthew and Patsy. I shouldn't have been surprised. After a few forced pleasantries, we walked across the street to a brand new 800-seat theater. As the lights dimmed, I began to sweat. Jet lag? PTSD? Oh God, I realized they didn't know I had cut the entire first reel.
So, yeah, I can't believe you didn't think of it. When I was listening to the story, it's the first thing I thought of when he was going back with the film, because you mentioned they cut it out earlier.
Yeah,
he said that earlier in the book, and I'm like, Oh, he hasn't told them yet. He's sitting next to them with like, hey, remember those scenes that you wanted me to film? I filmed some of them. Guess what? Let's watch this film together.
Yeah, as the lights dim. Oh, by the way.
Again, but you saw the same movie I saw, Doug. This is a beautiful me. Who could walk away from this thinking? So again, let's just see what happens. Maybe they do.
Or that I'd also excised an unnecessary subplot dear to Patsy about a romantic evening Shaw spends in Beaufort, South Carolina with Charlotte Fortin, a beautiful social worker whom he unconsciously offends when he refers to her mixed race. The movie played beautifully on the huge screen. While watching, I even entertained the fantasy that Matthew and Patsy would love what they saw and that all would be forgiven and forgotten. That was before the lights came up and they walked out without a word or a backward glance.
That sums it up.
Can you imagine, Doug? This is the director. You're watching the film with the director. You've sat through the whole film, and they got up and didn't even look behind themselves. They just walked out.
Yeah. After having everything that they wanted in their cut, if I was him, I would have expected that. He had this fantasy that the lights will come up and their eyes will be filled with tears and they'll love it. How could he have gleaned that from every interaction he's had with them before?
Well, I think he's kind of like me. I think there's a part of it hopes for the best because he had that amazing product. That's the thing. That's the point. He's like, despite all the crap that you guys put me through, check this thing out. And Matthew, you yourself, this is an amazing performance. Like, we got something here.
I also like, I don't know if you have the clip, but how Matthew Broderick wanted the rights to the final cut of the film. And Ed Zwick just flat out refused.
Yeah.
Like, didn't even entertain it. Just flat out refused.
Yeah. So, Doug, there you go. There's our coverage of Glory. I know, unlike the movie, we're not ending it the best way. Meaning, I don't know how to end this discussion because it's such a grandiose, huge film. You could dedicate a whole podcast like series to the film. You could do a minute by minute or 5 minute by 5 minute type episodes on this. There's so much with the scenery, the violence, the score, the acting, and then every scene itself.
Cinematography.
Cinematography.
Yeah, like it's a beautiful movie from beginning to end.
Yeah. Maybe we didn't do it justice. I don't know if we can. I know there's been many podcasts out there that have covered this film. You can just Google it. I think we maybe offered a different perspective or a unique one. Hope we did. Hope we gave some insights that maybe people didn't know before. But Doug, this has been an absolute pleasure having you on. I said, like a good friend. You're even just as good, if not a better podcaster.
Please. No way.
Is there anywhere people can see or hear you? Do you got any projects going on right now? What's going on with you? I know you're busy with the baby and jobs, but
yes,
what's going on?
Last of the Action Heroes podcast network. You can hear me with Ryan and Craig. You can hear me guest on Ryan's other shows too. Katie, I guested on her show once as well, her Retro Maiden show. So there's plenty of stuff going on. Plenty of places you can find me if you really want to. I don't know why you would.
Well, you're handsome. No, this has been an absolute pleasure. You are going to be coming on again. I've only got about 3 or 4 of you that I'm going to be having on this limited series podcast, and you're one of those people. So I think you'll be doing a second film. So if you're up for it, I'd love to have you on again.
For sure. This was awesome.
Okay.
Thank you. Thanks for having me, man. It's been an honor to serve under you, Colonel Balkan.
I would love to be buried next to you. I would love it. Lie on top of you forever. Fantastic film. Yes, this is a beautiful film. It's one of my favorite films of all time. This film is the reason why I'm doing this whole podcast years later. It was this film that got me like, who is this Ed Zwick guy? And I followed his career, not completely. That's kind of why I'm doing this podcast, because it's now forcing me to go through all of his films to talk about them all. But this was the genesis. This is a film that can't be matched, but it was his second film. So it's already here. Here we go. Second film, Glory. Hard to believe, because the next film we're going right back to something a little bit small and intimate, which kind of makes sense. I'm looking forward to hearing from Ed Zwick himself why he went to his next film. And yes, for teaser, Katie will be returning for episode 3. Yes, she'll already be back for that. I thought I need to have a female voice again. It looks like a movie where I need to have a female voice.
And you only know one female, so.
Yeah, she's the only female podcaster that I enjoy. No, I mean, no. I'm just kidding. No, she's fantastic, and I'm able to work with her with no problem. So yeah. All right, guys, thank you so much. I truly enjoyed this. Doug, take care, and we'll see you guys in the next episode.
Thanks, Ryan. I'll see you.